Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here, and today we've got interesting news out of Europe on supercharging. We've also got various policy updates worldwide. Got some more data on the Tesla Semi, and the Powerwall 3 has been added to Tesla's website officially. A few other items as well. All right, looking at the stock, Tesla today up 1.4%, closing at $271.30. Pretty nice day considering the NASDAQ up 0.3%, so nice outperformance for Tesla. And has managed to make it through the first, 36 hours or so of the Walter Isaacson Musk biography. So I guess that's a good thing. I'm still working my way through it, but seems like so far nothing too earth-shattering that is affecting the stock, at least initially here. So I think that's welcome news to a lot of us. All right, getting into today's news, we'll just a couple quick things on the stock. First, of course, Ron Barron, as we mentioned yesterday, was on CNBC today. Always great to hear his comments. We're not going to go into great detail on him because we've heard him talk about Tesla and Elon before, but strong in his defense of Elon and his belief in Elon. And of course, Tesla still believes that Tesla is going to be sort of a 5x multiple for Barron Capital by 2030, and said similar things for SpaceX and their confidence there as well. So always great to hear from Ron Barron. And then also UBS today increased their price target on Tesla. Previously $270, increased that to $290. Actually kind of bullish on the pricing strategy. They said that could potentially have some headwinds initially here, as we have seen, of course, the period that we've gone through, but they believe that can lead to Tesla having some sustainable long-term competitive advantages in terms of cost and demand. And then we also had the CPI come out this morning, so also something that we're not going to dig into quite as deep as maybe we normally would, but I would say broadly speaking, it came in a little bit higher than expectations, probably in the 10 basis point range. Most of that coming on the headline number. So that came in at 3.7% increase year over year. Mainly that was driven by gasoline, which increased, I believe, 10 or 11% year over year. So obviously that's why a lot of the time core is looked at or referenced. So that excludes food and energy. That came in at 4.3% year over year. So as you can see, that is a decrease from last month at 4.7%, but it did tick up a little bit higher than expected month over month on that core line. Again, that's where the 10 basis point versus expectation increase came in. But all that being said, expectations for FOMC meeting next week, they went down. So people still expecting a pause, 97% expectation for a rate pause at the FOMC meeting next week. It's about 92% yesterday. So even with the CPI coming in perhaps a bit higher than expectations, the market pretty much locking in on that expectation for a pause next week. All right, getting into the update out of Europe. So kind of an exciting one here for Tesla Supercharging. Under the EU Green Deal, there are funds laid out for charging infrastructure under the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Facility. This is going to allow a grant of 352 million euros. So Tesla's bid on a couple of projects here, and they've actually been awarded a significant portion of these funds, which were announced over the last couple of days. So if I can find the Tesla line on here, you can see here's the funding column, the recommended funding column. Looking through these, one sticks out as an extra digit above the rest, and that is Tesla's bid here. They say this would be recommended for about 134 million euros. Tesla says that this project, or I'm not sure if this is Tesla's wording or someone else putting this together, but they say that the project aims at deploying a little bit over 6,400 recharging points, 250 kilowatt stations in 613 locations in 16 countries in the EU. They say that the project foresees the deployment of both new recharging stations and replacement of existing outdated recharging points that have not satisfied the requirements of call-in terms of recharging capacity and open accessibility. Sorry about the background noise there. So interesting new locations as well as a combination of probably retrofitting or sort of upgrading some of the other stations that Tesla has built in the EU in the past. And this is actually not the only line. So Tesla's available on 2 lines here, and this other line is very similar wording in terms of the project, but for about 15 million euros. So bringing the total recommended funding up to about 148 million euros, or roughly $160 million. So pretty significant amount of funding. We've talked about the NEVI funding in the United States, and Man, the sirens are going really, really nuts today. Sorry about that. It's just a little bit distracting. Anyway, with these two funding lines, there's about $160 million worth of funding and over 7,000 charging connectors across about 700 different locations. So pretty exciting to see that. Again, the total funding amount here was 352 million euros. So Tesla actually responsible or being distributed about 42% of those total funds, which again, you can see, 26 different projects here. Obviously Tesla kind of stands alone in terms of the scale and the size of the funds that they are being allocated for. So exciting to see this, and hopefully, this goes a long way in terms of solidifying Tesla's network there in the EU. All right, we've also got an EU policy update, as well as one from India on kind of how they're looking at EVs right now. So nothing has changed here officially yet, but the EU has announced that they are looking at specifically China-made EVs and how policy should be managed for them, because they're aware of obviously the subsidization that is going on in China for electric vehicles. And if then those are offloaded into Europe, that can put competitive pressure on Europe manufacturing. So they're basically taking a look at that and, not wanting, as this article says, to happen to EVs, what kind of happened in the solar industry, where potentially that kind of flooded the market and hurt competitive positioning for developers or manufacturers of solar in Europe. So again, nothing official on that, but just something that is being looked at. Obviously, that could affect Tesla. I would expect that it would more affect other automakers. And even if it does affect Tesla, obviously Tesla would be hopefully a little bit better positioned, or at least adequately positioned with Giga Berlin. So a good reminder of localization and how that can be important strategically over time, as these things are obviously subject to change. And then for India, we've talked a couple times about this over the last couple of weeks, but India's, Commerce Minister said today that India will come up with a new policy in general to attract EV manufacturer investment, which of course is something that they have been looking at recently. So committing to coming up with a new policy, we'll wait to see what that is. And then specifically on Tesla, this person had mentioned that Tesla is expecting to source between $1.7 and $1.9 billion of components from India this year, up from about $1 billion last year. So obviously that tracks, roughly with Tesla's growth, maybe a little bit higher. So a little bit more of Tesla's total being allocated into India. But that just helps solidify probably these things that India's thinking about, and hopefully look to grow that investment from Tesla over time. All right, we also have one update on charging in the United States, and that is that the Biden administration today announced that they will provide up to $100 million in federal funding to repair and replace existing but non-operational EV charging infrastructure. Obviously, non-Tesla EV infrastructure has left some room for improvement, and this funding is aimed at improving those. I don't know if I'm 100% on board with that. Obviously, Tesla has found a way to manage this with extremely high reliability and high uptime. So, it's kind of assistance for those that have not done as well, which I guess there's at times merit to that. I don't know in this particular case that would be warranted. But nevertheless, $100 million of funding for trying to get those kind of back up to speed. All right, next we've got the Powerwall 3. So we talked probably a week ago, maybe a little bit less than that, but on the Powerwall 3 that we had seen on the Tesla Motors Club forum. So in this case, it has now been added to Tesla's website officially. So with little fanfare, because I don't think they expect to start deliveries of this until 2024 sort of officially. Obviously, we've seen deliveries kind of start, but certainly in terms of new orders, it'll be a bit. So as we talked about, energy capacity is still the same. The size and the weight, those are what we had discussed previously, so we won't spend a ton of time on that. But this does have the integrated inverter as a comparison to the Powerwall Plus. You can see the change there, and volumetrically the energy density with this included inverter definitely increasing. You can also see the change in the labeling of the inverter here, that the Powerwall Plus has up to 4 solar inputs with maximum power point trackers. They're saying that changes to 6 here with the Powerwall 3, so a little bit more capability out of the inverter, it looks like. And then as we talked about, and as Elon had mentioned, Powerwall 3 designed with power in mind, specifically, And it says that on grid, it can offer 11.5 kilowatts of continuous power, and then same thing with backup power as well. So that's a pretty significant increase. I would say roughly a doubling, depends on if you're looking at continuous or peak, obviously, but maybe a little bit less than a doubling for the continuous power for Powerwall 2. And of course, that's pretty similar for Powerwall Plus for continuous there as well. Looks like maybe a little bit higher. So overall, an increase in, I think, energy density, at least volumetrically. Weight-wise, maybe, a little bit difficult to determine that, I think, but probably do some math and figure that out as well. But nice to see this update, and hopefully over time we'll continue to learn a little bit more about it. I don't think this gives us any information yet on battery chemistry, but if anyone has seen that, please pass that along. All right, we talked about the updated Model 3 being filed with the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology in China. This is now giving us a little bit more detail, so Car News China reporting on that filing. So it looks like the rear-wheel drive, that will stay as a lithium iron phosphate battery, no change there. And the all-wheel drive variant, that is also not changing. It looks like that will continue to have a nickel manganese cobalt battery rather than LFP. So obviously that was part of the questioning with the update if the long-range version would shift to LFP, but that does not appear to be the case so far from the MIIT filings. Then yesterday we also talked about the data from the Tesla Semi that's coming in from the Run On Less event. Exciting, again, we're going to have a lot of this data coming in over the next couple of weeks, but a pretty exciting day for the Tesla Semi yesterday, so day 2. Tesla Semi number 3 that's being tracked actually went 794 miles in this single day. Obviously that involves some charging stops, but really nice to see that sort of, I guess, mileage or production out of the Tesla Semi over just a single day. We can see that this miles part of the graph here actually goes up to roughly 400 miles. So if we look there, you can see that when they were sort of at 0 miles for this trip, they ended at roughly 384 miles, I believe it was. If you extrapolate that with the state of charge like we had done yesterday, check my notes here, that actually extrapolates to about 472 miles for a full 100 to 0% discharge. Of course, that's never going to be really done in reality, but that would be how the sort of rated range would look in this case. Now, one of the differences here is that it appears that there was a lot more regeneration going back into the vehicle on whatever journey that they were doing here. Again, I wish they provided the elevation data. I don't think that we get that. Maybe it's hiding in here somewhere, but it looks like there was more opportunity for regen on this trip specifically than there was yesterday, which is going to help boost what that overall mileage is looking like. So kind of cool to see that from both the total distance covered perspective and also a little bit better efficiency than what we had seen yesterday. So again, we'll continue to keep an eye on that. There was one other piece of data here in terms of charging, just to kind of give us another data point. I'd talked about how I was curious to see maybe something below 10% charge up to about 80%. We're actually getting that already here the next day. So you can see, 6% state of charge going up to pretty much all the way to full 98%. But looking at the more probably pertinent range would be, I think, in that 5% to 80% range. That's probably what would be most heavily utilized, I would guess. So in this case, that took about 57 minutes to go from 6% up to 57%. But again, we're seeing a taper later on, not so much of a taper early on. So it would suggest that there is more capacity that could, charging rate capacity that could be taken advantage of in the future. We've talked about the confusion on the Tesla Semi Mega Chargers, if those are more than 750 kilowatts or if they are 750 kilowatts. I think the data so far is suggesting that that's probably the peak right now. But again, just based on how this is looking, I think there is opportunity for that to improve over time. All right, last couple of things. So obviously the biography has now been out for almost 2 days. We are getting a little bit more context on discussions that we previously had. So obviously we had talked about the sort of leaked images of the robotaxi concept. Just wanted to provide some context on this. So this is in the book. The image is included under a chapter that has the time frame of 2014 to 2016. It says, Franz with an early version of the robotaxi. So obviously we weren't super clear on what this timeline was at that point, but it looks like this was probably pretty early. And of course, things have most definitely changed since 2014, 2016. And just a reminder that Elon, as they were having this debate about, $25,000 car versus robotaxi or both, ultimately ending up on both, Elon did say, I think in 2022, when he saw the most recently introduced concept to him at that point, that is when he said that this felt like the future, which kind of implies that, this might be a little bit, what Elon was talking about there might be a little bit different than some of the images that we're seeing or have talked about so far. So I just wanted to add a little bit of context on that, and just maybe a couple other things while we're on the subject. The book is very clear that Elon had initially had ideas of steering wheel-less and pedal-less Model 3s and Model Ys. Obviously, we haven't seen those materialize, but it's kind of always been on the drawing board consistently for Elon. And then with Solar Roof, there is a decent amount of information in there in the biography on it. But what felt relevant to discuss here was the sort of production rates. So in 2021, they talked about hitting sort of a new record production, or a new record install rate rather, of 74 solar roofs in 1 week. And then obviously they wanted to keep increasing that, but we have seen with Solar Roof, it hasn't obviously materialized how Tesla had hoped at one point. And by 2022, it mentions something about 30 installs in a week. So probably not too surprising given what we have, not seen materialize with the Solar Roof so far. Hopefully that'll come someday, but just wanted to kind of throw out those stats on the install rates. Obviously they're quite low. So hopefully, again, something that improves over time. And then lastly, Elon did partake in the AI summit at the Senate today. So this was organized by Chuck Schumer, and Elon was caught briefly for an interview after this. I think CNBC published that, and he seemed pretty happy with how it went. Obviously didn't have a ton of time to comment on it, but felt like it was a productive conversation, and just seemed to be in a generally pretty good mood. I think it's kind of a funny scenario or a situation for Elon to be in, as obviously this is with Bill Gates, with Mark Zuckerberg also in attendance. So just kind of a cast of characters that we've been hearing about recently. All right, but that'll wrap it up for today. So as always, thank you for listening. Make sure you're subscribed and signed up for notifications. You can also find me on X at Tesla Podcast. And we'll see you tomorrow for the Thursday, September 14th episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.